Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is Jennifer Davison. I met her a month ago in London at the Ian McGilchrist Future of Humanity conference, and I was really glad to meet you. And even you came to my little event the following day, and that was really a lovely thing for you to do. And I greatly appreciate you joining with us that day. So welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be with you, Ed. And I wondered, since you said I can be in control, I wondered if I could invite you to do a little deep breath with me,
Sure.
because I'm also a little nervous because it's my very first podcast.
Well,
And I'd love to,
maybe your
yeah,
first podcast, but it's not your first conversation. And
yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
okay.
But anyway, just for speaking of, we were just speaking a little bit about being embodied. And the voice starts with a breath, right, which is that eternal energy, that thing that makes life. So I love to also connect to people sometimes like that. So in the work that I do, we teach what we call the operatic breath, and that's just basically breathing into your diaphragm. And when we are young singers, the voice teacher will tell us, imagine that you're smelling a rose, because then you breathe nice deeply through your nose and you get a little smile on your face because a rose is beautiful and it smells good. And then you breathe out as long as you can. So we can do that. So you imagine your rose and you bring it to your nose. And you just let it out. Thank you. That feels better.
That's stuff we do in choir practice at church. So
Yeah, right.
we're doing
Yeah,
breathing exercises and getting our mouths limbered up and all this.
that's right.
I mean, so for all those who were watching, Jennifer is an opera singer, and tell us how that all came about. I mean, here you are from Ohio, and now you're in Vienna, and I mean, what better place to be an operatic singer than in Vienna, Austria?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the short version. I'll try to do it in a nutshell. Well, I have to say, I felt like I was always a musician. When I was 4 years old, I got a tennis racket for Christmas and I started strumming on it, and my parents were like, okay, maybe we needed to get her a guitar instead. So I started with the guitar and then with piano, and we were singing in church. My mother has a beautiful voice and would sing as a soloist in church choir, and she started taking me, and it wasn't long that I was playing my guitar in those, Catholic guitar masses and singing. And yeah, so that's sort of where my musical life started, I would say. And so it was always very connected to a sense of spirit and a sense of something deeper and something meaningful. And I just kept with all of my instruments. I thought at first I would be a pianist, so I got really serious about the piano and I studied piano at the Interlochen Arts Academy.
Mhm.
But when I got there, I found out how many very talented pianists there are in the world. So, and what it means to be a pianist, which is to sit alone in a practice room for many hours a day. And they also had a fantastic choir that I got to join. So I started having a lot more fun in the choir. And then I got in the small choir, and then I was suddenly a soloist in the choir. So I thought, okay, maybe there's another path. So I actually applied as a double major and went to the Peabody Conservatory as just a voice major. So that's
Wow.
how that started. Yeah. And
What?
how I got to Vienna is, if you want me to take you all there. So I studied in the States, and then one of the typical paths for opera singers is the European path, because there are many full-time opera houses. I don't know if you know that Germany is the number one opera producing country in the world.
Mhm.
There are over 80 opera houses in Germany alone. And there's a tradition of this in all the German speaking countries. So Germany, Austria, Switzerland. They all have full-time theaters. So when you work at the theater, you're like a civil servant. You're working for the government, for the community, and you have a full-time job with, 6 weeks vacation. And yeah, so that always seemed cool to me because my dad was a diplomat, so I already knew about traveling and life in Europe. So that was what I wanted to try, the European path. And I managed to get my first job in Switzerland and met my best friend who is Viennese, and that's how I ended up in Vienna.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I have really close friends from Wyoming whose daughter is in high school at Interlochen.
Ah, cool.
And she went there a year ago for summer camp, and they were so impressed with her. They persuaded them to move to Traverse City and
Really?
for her to be a full-time student.
Wow, that's amazing.
She's a singer-songwriter, and she's just amazing. And
Oh, cool.
it's very exciting to see a young person who finds something that they're already really good at, but also
Yeah,
is competitive, and that they throw themselves into it, and you get to watch them develop. It's just there's nothing better
yeah,
to it.
yeah. That's amazing. That is amazing. And now we know in through arts and health research that that's actually a great protection against all kinds of things, and like a it's great for your brain if you're studying music or get passionate about anything artistic as a child. You come through your teenage years with a lot more actually mental health and social health, and that stuff you're doing in your brain is also protecting you at the end of your life. So
Right.
it's like protection against neurodegeneration as well. So yeah, and it's just awesome to watch what passion does to young people, to all of us, to any of us. Yeah, cool.
I don't know if it's still true. I mean, I heard this 20 years ago, but at that point in time, Georgia Tech, when they were recruiting new engineering students, one of the things they were looking for is whether the student had learned to play a musical instrument, because it changed how their brain functioned.
Hmm.
It made them
Hmm.
much more broad and much more able to put things together in a more, I guess, a greater with greater synthesis, maybe is the word to use.
Yeah,
And I thought that was really fascinating, and it
yeah.
put them as a cut above other engineering schools because they were doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fascinating thing that people are sort of catching on to that now. I hear things like, a music degree is a great prep degree for medicine, for law, for all kinds of things. And that is because, well, if you've gotten good enough to be a musician at that level, or yeah, even if you've just played an instrument, you're dealing with discipline, of course, that's part of it. But there is, I mean, it's in fact the case now. Now we know that it's every part of your brain that you're using when you're playing music. So we don't even talk anymore about music and the brain, but rather music is your brain, because it's like the brain is just like a resonating body, all of it.
So
Yeah. So that's
so you have at some point brought together the idea of arts and health in and I don't really understand what you have done there. I just heard you, when we were together in London, you spoke about how this has become this important thing that you're doing, but I don't know what this thing is. Can you describe to us what arts and health is?
Yeah. Yes, and forgive me, I can't. It's like everything is leading me to the same place because my mind is full of it right now. I have the honor and excitement to be part of this really cool movement. So I actually just fell into it when COVID hit, because that's when sort of being on the stage was not an option anymore, and I had found it when I went back to visit Peabody. Actually, I found that the Johns Hopkins University, and Peabody is affiliated with Hopkins, was a big driver in this movement, the Brain Science Institute, the Arts and Mind Lab. And so through my Peabody connections, I got involved in the work, this work that they were doing. And it just, I think it's so exciting. It's coming out of a field called neuroaesthetics. So the study of aesthetics that now is focused on what's actually happening in the brain. And
Hmm.
and that totally appeals to me because I've been sort of as you probably have already heard, a brain science hobbyist since I was a young student. So I've been following music in the brain for a long time, and that's always fascinated me. Especially because when I was a student, they found out that the brain has plasticity.
Mhm.
Do you remember when that was in the late 90s?
Mhm.
That's when it sort of hit the public knowledge realm. And I remember picking up a book, The Brain That Changes Itself. I think that was what that book was called. And that really changed me because there was something about understanding that, there that old story of, you get the talent you're born with, you get the body you're born with, everything you're just fixed, and you can do a little bit, but basically it's all set. Um, that story was so limiting. And when you feel like when you're a sensitive person, or well, all of us know that we have flaws and challenges, and you think, my God, is it going to be my whole life like this? And just to know that this is not the story. The story is we have this incredible stuff in us, all of us, and it's up to us, and we have choices to make what we can make of it. Of course, we get different opportunities, and that's something to be discussing all the time. But it's one of the things I love about Ian McGilchrist's thinking, right? That attention is a moral act. So that's just straight out of brain science. What you focus on and what you do shapes your brain, shapes your body, shapes who you are in the world. And that's a choice we make all the time. I find it very empowering.
It is very interesting, and I totally agree with him, and I agree with you, and I think that what I think we're at a transition point. We're emerging out of the machine age into an organic age, and that's
Yeah.
really oversimplifying it. But what that means is that in the machine age, we're all kind of things. We're fixed objects,
Mm.
be quantified and objectified and exchanged for other parts. The utilitarian mindset was very, very prominent, and that is fading because it doesn't work well in a growing world of complexity.
Hmm.
And I see that complexity because people, regardless of what the critics of social media are saying, people are becoming much more um, attuned to their own sense of who they are. And they're
Hmm.
acting much more on their own sense of what they want than they did
Hmm.
even 10 years ago. And having a phone, you know, you know, we had an exchange an hour before we met, and you were in
Hmm.
a car somewhere there in Vienna,
Hmm.
fighting traffic, and I'm on another call, and we're able to communicate with each other while we're also communicating with other people, and we're half a world away. I mean, it's that
It's amazing.
that has changed. In the words of Marshall McLuhan, the medium, this medium and the other medium that we're looking at right here, is the message. That medium is we have a much greater opportunity to connect with one another in meaningful ways than ever in human history.
Hmm. Yes. Yes, I agree. And then the question is, are we doing that, and how to make sure that we are, because we can also be very distracted by those things.
But you know, I don't see it as black and white. I see that it is there's
Yeah.
there's this transition. It's
Yeah.
the flow. The flow of time is the flow
Yeah.
of change, and we're
Yes.
going through change. And people like yourself who have a history, a past, an experience in the arts, and particularly in music, you have something to give to us that I don't think other people understand. And I had another artist, musician, on who's a friend of mine. He here in Winston Salem. I had him on the podcast back in late summer, and he teaches at the School of the Arts here, and his field is um, the shift from I don't, it's really an archaic thing about music theory. It's music
Okay.
theory, the shift from the Baroque to the Renaissance, or the Renaissance. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, yeah, and he was showing you about modes, wasn't he? I
Yeah,
think
that's
I
right.
listened to a little bit
Yeah.
of that. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So, but I think anyway. In having that conversation, it was really clear that, um, and I think he made this point, that music, the experience of music, is at kind of the pinnacle of human experience, because it brings all these different things together in one place, and
Yeah,
it kind of percolates down like water going through the ground down to the bedrock, but it's percolating down, and having an effect on the whole.
yeah.
And and some of the other people that I've interviewed, we've talked about the senses. You know,
Mhm.
in one case, it was a an architect from Finland named Johanni Pallasmaa, and he had written a book called The Eyes of the Skin. His,
Mm,
his perspective was, and he's drawing this from the science, was that the eyes are the least dependable sense, and the skin is the greatest. And
mm,
one of the things that happens when you play music is that you're playing with your hands, or you're playing with, you're playing a horn,
mhm,
also hearing it in your mind, and
mhm.
it's being expressed bodily,
Mhm.
and so all of that really comes together, I think, in some kind of holistic way that really is worth us reflecting
Yeah,
on.
absolutely. And that's, to go back to that original question about arts and health. So now, before we didn't know as much about it, they would put musicians into the EEG machines, and you'd lay there and try to sing.
Hmm.
And then they try to see what was happening. And we've had pretty interesting science on that for 30 years. And of course, the use of music in health is eternal. I mean, it's been a part of healing forever. And that is so. In fact, the idea of arts and health is a very old idea. It's just that during this era of machine, what we've been talking about, it kind of got pushed off to the side because they thought they'd found everything better in medicine. And of course, there are amazing things that this century brought us through medicine. But now it's sort of like, okay, like you said, it's not doing all the jobs. So we're sort of looking again holistically, right? What else is there, and how might these things work together? And that's what we're finding out. So when you have a thing, so now you've got these devices that you can, mobile devices, to see what's happening. And so people are painting, singing, dancing. You can really see what's happening live and in the moment. And that's when that science exploded and everybody saw all that activity, and they talk about like fireworks in the brain when you're
Right.
being creative or listening. And of course, that makes perfect sense. Just like music is percolating, all of the systems, more connection means more efficiency, usually, right? I
Yeah.
mean, life is all about connections in so many ways. And so if the whole brain is connected, then lots of stuff is going on that's working for all the parts. And so this movement is saying, hey, what can we do with this amazing science now? You know, Also because we're fighting all the time as artists, which is for me so crazy about being relevant in our society. What are the arts for? It's just cheesecake. That's also from the 90s, Steven Pinker, if I ever meet that guy. But yeah, it's just like just way off. Now we really know what it is, what it can do. And now the question, the movement is trying to say, how do we fill this research to practice gap? What can we do now with this awesome information to make it practical, to make it accessible, to make it easy, so that we all start to embody that knowledge and connect to ourselves and connect to this creativity. Yeah, for well-being, just like we all know it's good to do sports or eat healthy. We spend a lot of time and money on those things. But even better than those two things is actually being creative and getting involved with the arts.
Yeah, I have found, I joined the choir at church in August, and I have found it extraordinarily difficult because I'm reading things there that I don't have any language for. You know, the notes on the
Mm,
page, and
yeah,
the fact that there are four and sometimes five and six voices going on, and
yeah.
we're singing a Mendelssohn piece, von Himmelhoch, if you're familiar with that.
Oh, so beautiful.
We're singing that this Christmas, and I get lost. I mean, it's so hard, but then there are moments when all of a sudden the music and the words and the emotion all come together, and I'm just overwhelmed by the whole experience.
Mm,
And I can imagine that that's what you experienced a lot when you're on stage and you're singing some great opera, and
mm.
you find that, am I tell me if I'm correct, that you find
Mm.
at some point you kind of transcended your own life experience and you've taken on kind of an out of body experience, and that you'll always be grateful for that moment.
Yeah, it's incredible that you're bringing that up, because that's my favorite thing. In the workshops, I give workshops with my colleague, and we have a little social entrepreneur project called Art Wave, and so we do workshops where we bring this message and communicate the science, but also get active and do singing and breathing and showing people how it works and how they can integrate it in their daily lives very easily. And so we talk about all the research on singing, which is so extensive because it's the easiest thing to do, right? Everybody has a voice. And so we've made a little chart, like what would the pharmacist have to put into a pill if you had a pill that was like singing? You know, what's all that stuff in there? And so it's a long list of things, just amazing. And the last one that I put on my chart is this transcendence.
How
That
about
shows up a lot. Yeah, transcendence is absolutely already in the research about singing in groups. So what you're experiencing is exactly because when we join our voices in music, there's also something called collective effervescence. I love that one. That's this doing something joyful in community. And that is giving us that feeling of awe, which is that feeling of something greater than myself, right? That the whole is so much more than the sum of its parts. And that's what's very beautiful about choral singing. Yeah. And I experienced that in the opera too.
so an opera is basically a story
Mm,
with songs. It's
mm.
oversimplifying it, I know that. But are some of the operas that you have sung, um, take a very personal meaning because they speak to something about yourself that maybe you don't want to share that, but there's something about that this opera as a, I mean, I'm thinking about, say, one of Puccini's operas opposed to one of the Ring cycle of Wagner. You know, that's
Yeah,
not really as personal
yeah,
as, say, La Boheme
yeah,
or Tosca or, you know, something like that. I mean, it
yeah.
happened. It doesn't happen that way.
That's a really interesting question too, because you would think, this role speaks to me, and so that's the role I really identify with. But it sort of happens in the other way, And because you were just talking about Transcendence, I was thinking immediately about Madame Butterfly when I got to sing Madame Butterfly, because I think that was probably one of the most, I mean, luckily, I'm lucky to say there have been many that I experienced because I'm sensitive to those things, but one that just really sort of knocked me off, like, whoa, was in Butterfly. And it was like, um, I was in the middle of a scene, and I just felt it was weird. It was like visually, I felt like I was standing in on a horizon and looking forward, like to an endless future, but also backwards to an endless past. It was really like I had this sense of being in the middle of something infinite.
Mhm.
And after that, I was like, "Oh my God, that's this joy and privilege of being able to stand in the middle of a masterpiece."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Yeah, that's what we get to do as opera singers." And that's, I mean, as musicians very often, but certainly, it's because it's very embodied and visual, and it's everything in the opera. I am really, it's spatial. I'm standing on a stage in the middle of people singing, with an orchestra, the sounds of an orchestra coming from below, and then an audience. I mean, the energy of an audience. I mean, COVID was like the time where this was just so obvious that there is no music in a way without an audience. Not really, not the same. That's
Oh,
that's absolutely a relational thing going on there. So, yeah. So, and what I found, and it was so interesting with Butterfly, because I was sort of against Butterfly, as a young person, especially as a young feminist. I was like, oh, Butterfly, this typical weak woman. And then the guy just leaves her, and she's like, I love you anyway. So this was sort of going against my sensibilities as a young person. So she came a little later in my life, appropriately for vocal things. But what I found out was when I started singing her, I like found out who she was. So it wasn't like me identifying with her. It was like her teaching me, about her. And that was so fascinating. And I was like, oh my, I thought that Butterfly was this typical weak female role who dies at the end. And actually she's an incredible artistic rebel. I mean, she was a huge rebel. She like went against her whole culture, and she believed in the power of love and had the desire, to break out of something that was so tight. And so that is more my experience, that I get in and I kind of fall in love, and I get to know characters, and then they are teaching me things about myself, like that I was, a little bit limited to think that she was a weak person.
I think the same thing happens to us who are we're not the performers, but we're the audience. And
Mhm.
and the stories capture us, and it's the performance of the singer who pulls us into it oversimplifies it and almost minimalizes it to say into the emotion of it, because it's not really the emotion. It's something deeper. It's more dramatic. It's more of the life situation of this moment,
Mm.
um, that captures you, as if you're sensitive enough to allow for that performance to envelop you and pull you into it, and all of a sudden it's transformational.
Oh, you're saying all of my favorite words. That's fantastic. Yes, it is transformational. That is right. Hmm.
Which
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about how it's, because of course for me, I'm biased toward my art form. What is transformational for you about an opera? Like, thinking about that. What transforms? Can you describe that at all? I know it's hard, but
I definitely can, because um, and it's not just opera. It's all kinds of music. It's it's movies. It's books.
mm,
It's It's hearing someone who's a really good speaker speak. Um,
Yeah.
what I find is that um, there's something that we share, and I don't even want to put a name on what it is that we share that connects us together at some deep level where what you're doing on the stage,
Mm,
you're singing, and it's very there's a lot of pathos in that moment of your singing. We're brought into that, and we see ourselves in that moment, and we ask the question, what would I do? Would I do the
mm,
same? I mean,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I think
mm-hmm.
that's what a good story writer does, and but a good opera composer does that, and it reaches us at these levels that McGilchrist talks about, which is the entire body. It's
Mm,
not mental. It is mental, but it's also body. It's emotion. It's a
mm,
sense of place. It's a sense of where we fit into the universe. I mean, it's
mm,
all these things,
mm,
and we have it for a moment, and then it goes away. But it doesn't leave us.
mm. Yeah.
The psychiatrists have been talking over the last 20 or 30 years about how trauma it becomes embodied, and there's things that trigger that embodied response to trauma. Well, I think
Mm-hmm.
beauty and to joy or to unity or to love or whatever it may be, I think those things also become embodied. And maybe what I'm really trying to say, Jen, is that you help us learn what we want to be like in some way. We have you're giving us some manner of a of a of a vision of aspiration to be. I want to be like that character. I want to be heroic. I want to be courageous. I want to be humble. I want to be the person who is willing to sacrifice for the one that he loves. I mean, those things are presented to us in story and in music, and they're not just presented as, well, that's a nice story.
Mm, mm.
No, it's something that's deeply part of who we are as human beings, and I think
Yeah.
that's why um, that's why I really love this stuff.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. And I think that's also so important to understand because we do end up talking a lot about, and it's important about negative emotions and trauma, and those things can be embodied, and to understand that. And I think this is also why there's so much we're finding so much out about what human potential is. We're able to uncover these things and find out what's going on in this inner cosmos that we all live in and float around in. But I think we spend too, that tendency to spend time in the negative is so strong, and there are these other things going on. Beauty is absolutely transformative, and those memories of beauty will stay with you. They resonate, right? There's so much about resonance and vibration, that the whole universe is vibration. And this is what's happening when we're in the middle of those beautiful things. And there's also this myth of beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think that gets overused because, like you say, there's this collective thing that happens, and that's what they've found also in the science on beauty. For example, the most powerful uh, experience of beauty apparently is moral beauty,
Yeah.
right? And this is like, oh my gosh, if and we're all experiencing that, or this gorgeous sunrise you have behind you. These are things, there's who's going to say that's not beautiful, right? There's
Right.
so much beauty that connects us, and that's absolutely clear, and that helps us feel this togetherness that we have, and this universal humanity that's so important.
So another aspect of this is you're saying this is what comes to me. And what you're doing is you're creating a context for us to evaluate ourselves,
Hmm.
a non-threatening context where we're free to do that or not.
Hmm.
And when we look at context, the thing that interests me is the context of the person who has created the work, in this case, music.
Mm.
So the first time I came to Vienna, I got tickets to the Philharmonic, the,
Hmm. Awesome.
the music arena, and I went on a Sunday morning, and they played two pieces. They played Shostakovich's cello concerto, which was
Wow.
amazing. But then they played Strauss's Alpen Symphony.
Mm.
And listening, I mean, I was sitting up on the second floor, looking down
Yeah.
on the orchestra, watching all the percussion, and and I'm thinking he wrote this to describe the world that surrounds this city. And it was very moving.
Mm.
It was, to me, it was a personal statement by Strauss about something that he loves. And now other people like me can love it because, well, for me, I love mountains, and that story is about the Alps, and the,
Mm.
the mountains of Austria.
Mm.
And and so it was just kind of the most exquisite, perfect moment of experiencing music that I've ever had.
Yeah. That's awesome. And isn't that, because that's the next thing, right? The spatial element. I mean, how is it that music can make mountains in our minds? How is it that composers figure out how to do that? And I had a really inspiring experience once. I was working with a group of teenagers, and it was a job that I had taken because I didn't have any work as a singer at the time. And I thought, well, let me see if I could do some teaching. And it was middle school. That's the hardest group to teach. And I went in there trying to teach them about Mozart and Beethoven and all these composers that they didn't really care much about, sadly, even though they lived in Vienna. But anyway, so I was doing my best, and I was struggling with it. And one day I was like, all right, I'm just going to do something I'm going to call imagination listening. So I had, my eighth graders sitting in a room, or maybe it was 10 of them. And I was like, let's just listen to the music and see what comes up. So we would do this sometimes. And I put on Beethoven Pastoral, so just tell me. And I didn't tell them what it was, so that was part of the game. They're going to journal, they're going to draw, just listen. And when we were done with the Beethoven, I was like, okay, what's coming up? And like one by one, each of them had, I see like a field, flowers, birds. And I was like, and I was like, does anybody know what this piece is? No. Composer? No. No clue that this was a symphony about nature,
Yeah.
but and no interest in the symphony about nature. And yet they sit there, and these things come in front of them, into their mind's eye. And I was just so fascinated by that, because that is the other thing that the science is finding out. You don't even have to like it. You don't even have to want to like it. It's just doing it.
Or you could come to like it if you allow
Yeah,
yourself
of course.
opportunity for it to have its effect.
Yes. I mean, of course, everything can intensify with the love, as you said. You come to love it. And with every knowledge of a thing, once you're interested in it, the love deepens through knowing, right? So, and of course, you can know, I mean, you can never know a piece like that, you know what I mean? Because there's so much depth, and it will always change. Like every time you come up again to a piece. Like I've had the opportunity to sing many roles in the same opera, like, or many in Magic Flute, and then also like all three of the women in Don Giovanni, for example. And then you show up and you're like, oh, now also spatially, I'm in a whole different world now in this same piece if I'm the Countess instead of Susanna, and then it's just so new all the time. Yeah.
It does, as you do that, does one of the characters become like your best friend? That you really like this character? I'm glad to sing the other character, but this character, I really like her. Does that happen?
Yeah. Okay. So did you have a preference for one over the other? Yeah. Yes, for sure. Also, your voice will tell you, and the voice changes. So that could also be, but I guess like, yes. And then, for example, in Don Giovanni, there's these two roles, Elvira and Anna. Very often the same soprano will have sung all those parts. I mean, I'm one of many sopranos who's done that. And there you find out a little bit about character, like which of those roles fits you. You learn about your character. And sometimes there's a little bit like, well, I'm probably more like an Elvira, but I so much if I wish I could be like Anna. There's a little bit of that comes up. Yeah.
So I have to ask you this question since you're an opera singer. Have you sung the Ring Cycle, Wagner's Ring Cycle?
I have not made that leap into that realm.
It's a totally different kind of singing, isn't it?
Well, I mean, yeah, most of the roles are for dramatic voices. And I mean, there's a couple of Wagner roles that would come into question for me. The opportunity has not presented itself of yet. But I have to say, I have not sought this opportunity. But who knows? Maybe it's like Butterfly. I don't know.
Correct me if
It
I'm
doesn't
wrong. There are
tell
people,
me why you asked. Yeah,
well,
sorry.
because I've heard that there are people who who just focus on being a Wagnerian singer,
Mm,
and
mm,
they only sing the Wagnerian corpus of operas,
yeah,
and then you have other people who have a much broader scope, like you. I would say you have a much broader scope of the material that you're prepared to sing. I mean, that's what I've heard, and I subscribe to the Berlin Philharmonic channel, and
mm,
so I one of the things I enjoy watching is they'll do concert versions of these operas, and it's very interesting to watch without the drama there, but you're watching the singers sing with each other. I mean, it's a different thing altogether. I know that, but
yeah.
it is kind of very interesting.
Yeah. Are you a a Wagnerian, like a Wagnerianer, as we would say in German?
I like it. It's not so much the story; it's the drama of it. It's this huge landscape of drama, of power,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
and it's a remarkable work, um, and it kind of takes you out of your own existence to watch it. And but I also like Puccini, and I like Verdi, and I don't know much
Yeah.
about modern works, but I, I like it. I'm uninformed. I have I'd like to know what I'm hearing being sung. That's another part of it. I'm
Yeah.
finding it interesting to listen to things like cantatas and oratorios and things like that.
Mhm.
We have a small college here in Winston called Old Salem, and it's a women's college, and it's in an old German community, which my family
Mm,
is part of the uh, original people that live there, and
mm,
it's close by the North Carolina School of the Arts, and so there's this arts culture that kind of envelops this section of town. And back back early in the fall, the Bach Society of our community put on a performance of Bach's coffee cantata in the coffee shop that's in the middle of Old Salem.
Yeah,
And
super.
it was so much fun. It was so much,
That is great.
and the young woman who sang the female lead, she had so much joie de vivre, as they would say,
Yeah,
of putting herself into this, because it's a story of a girl and a boy and her father doesn't like coffee, and it's a silly
yeah,
story,
yeah,
but
yeah,
Bach wrote it for it to be performed in a coffee shop.
yeah. Yes.
So that's
I
kind
mean,
of
Bach, yeah, Bach was amazing. I don't, have you ever looked into his history? Like, I think you would have liked him. He was taking care of children a lot and fighting for their rights. And he had this boys group. And I had the chance to go to Leipzig for the first time last spring. And so I was in the Thomaskirche, the St. Thomas, where he worked and wrote all of his cantatas for, 30 years. And heard some amazing Bach, and heard lots of fun things about the kind of guy he was. And that was
yeah.
great.
I I have studied a little bit of this. I took a course in college a long time ago in romantic music, and we
Mm.
looked at, obviously Beethoven, Brahms, Schubert, you know, and um, and finished up with Mahler. So
Oh, wow. Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
all of this means something to me because it touches parts of me that do not have words, and I think that's
Yeah.
part of the spirituality of music, is that it's a nonverbal form of communication that fills us with a sense of being and a sense of
Yeah.
place, sense of of um of importance or beauty or whatever it may be, that also unites us with people who are like you, are the performers
Mm.
who have chosen
Mm.
to do
Yeah.
as a life and as a career.
Yeah, I think that's also so important, and something that McGilchrist's teachings have helped me understand a lot better, this idea that that right hemisphere doesn't have language.
Yeah.
So that place, that has the overview and this creativity and all that stuff, it's really hard to put any of that into words. And I actually think it's one of the reasons that the arts have gotten pushed into the little corner that they've gotten pushed into, because we became this, literate, mechanistic, scientific culture and
Right.
civilization, and everything should be analyzed and put on charts and put into words. And I just think, you can't really. I mean, you can try, and we've been trying, but I think it's another reason why we've had like this science on music in the brain, or arts for your health, for quite a while. And it's like, it doesn't matter, so many studies about how good music is and they still are cutting it in schools. And you're like, huh, what's going on here? And I do think there's something happening, that because that what's happening there is on another realm and it has to be experienced,
Yeah.
that it's harder to communicate. And so when you're dealing with people who day in and day out are just, filling out their forms and signing budgets, that it's like they literally, it like does not compute. And I think there's a lot of thinking or experiencing and communicating we have to figure out how to do
Sort of
to
life diminishing.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that that's what I see. And I'm so glad to have met you, just to express my appreciation for the world you live in and work in, and what you bring to us, because I think it's an essential part of a healthy world that we have people who professionally perform great
Mm.
works of theater, of opera, of music, um, and I think it's essential for a healthy world.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. And I just want to say one little thing because we talked about Wagner. The last time I saw a Wagner opera, which was at the Staatsoper, just a few months ago, I saw Lohengrin. And, Wagner's, I have not fallen in love yet. But the thing that really struck me on that day was it is so audacious. I mean, this dude, to say, I'm going to have this many people in my orchestra and this many people in my choir, and everyone's going to sing for 6 hours, and it's like highly complex music. It's hard to sing, not just vocally, but musically. It's hard to learn. And, and then I'm going to build my own theater. I mean, just the audacity and this largeness is so, I think that alone, is because I think so often we play way too small as people, as human beings, as men and women. And so getting into the theater and being confronted with somebody who just lived only XXL, reminds us, hey, if he can do it, why can't I, and reminds us and helps us sort of encourages us to be courageous and hook into our own audaciousness. So, yeah.
lo sai, vado, vado. E quella donna bionda lassù, la Maddalena ti piace? È troppo bella, prezioso elogio. Ridi, quegli occhi cilestrini gialli vidi, ce n'è tanti per mondo. Aspetta, aspetta, e l'altra volta la vedi, tu lavi, non caso, passi, e vedi, mi sono un'ora, e via, la tirata, a me.
That's what we're here for. I'm glad if you have that experience.
Oh yeah, I do. And I try to have it daily. So,
Awesome.
so
Awesome.
you sent me a couple of videos of you performing, and I'm going to find a way to include them in our conversation because I
Awesome.
want people to see you perform, and how exciting! And someday I'd like to see you perform in person. So we'll, someday would love to see that happen because
Great.
it'll be great.
I would love that too. Thank you. And thank you for sharing all those beautiful words. That's so, you know that the business is tough. So meeting somebody for whom it's meaningful is, on the other side, it's always very special. So thank
Oh,
you.
you're welcome. I'm glad to have been of service. So
Yeah. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay.
And thank you everyone for watching. I hope this has been meaningful to you. I hope that you will go out in the next few minutes and find some music to listen to that will let you just sit there for 5 minutes and allow it to bathe over you and to carry you to a new place that may be beneficial to you. Who knows? So thank you for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment if you will. And we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye-bye.
Thanks.